ahead and get started, everybody, and we may have some folks that jump on during the presentation as well, but welcome. I'm Jessica with the Community Foundation. I think I know most everyone here, and this is, I think, our 8th now nonprofit listening session via Zoom, and we will probably have many more to come. So I wanted to do a quick welcome and then turn it over to Ashley, who's going to be leading the charge on our discussion today. So Ashley, can you flip to the next slide? So just a quick note about what we're going to be talking about today. We have 3 wonderful panelists: Linda Jilk from Literacy Volunteers, Laureen from the YMCA at Virginia Tech, and Karen with Radford Fairlawn Daily Bread. And our focus today is on recruiting and retaining volunteers. This is something we heard quite a bit about as we were doing surveys and reaching out to folks on the kinds of topics they wanted to hear about during COVID. And obviously, COVID complicates a lot what we can do with volunteers, and particularly since for many of us, the volunteer base we have is older or potentially vulnerable. We have to be creative about recruiting those volunteers, retaining them, training them, and getting the work done, particularly for organizations that are seeing an increase in the demand for their services at the same time that they may have fewer volunteers. So we're going to hear about how these agencies have done that in just a panel conversation, and we have some questions prepared, and then there'll also be plenty of opportunity for folks to ask questions. Ashley, go ahead and jump ahead one. So just a quick reminder for our sort of listening session etiquette, if you will. Mute your mic when you're not speaking. That just makes it a lot easier for us to hear the speaker. And also we record these sessions, so that makes it easier for folks who are listening later on. And then if you have a question while the speakers are talking, go ahead and put that in the chat. I'm going to be monitoring the chat, and I'll kind of jump in with your questions or ask you to ask your question after you've put it in the chat. So as I said, we've got some questions prepared, but then we'll open it up to our panelists. So many of you have had the chance on some of these calls and at different meetings to meet Ashley Agee. Ashley is new-ish, I guess now, to the staff at the foundation. She joined us this spring as our Director of Communications and Outreach. You have probably worked with her mostly on Give Local NRV, which is now a part of her domain, as it were. But she also is overseeing our outreach and leadership training efforts like Third Thursday and these listening sessions. So she's going to be taking the lead on this and future sessions. So with that, Ashley, I'll turn it over to you. I'll monitor the chat and I'll let you work with our panelists.
Thank you. And I'm excited to be here and to start working with you guys more closely. I wish I could meet you in person, but Zoom will have to do for now. So I want to thank our panelists for agreeing to be on the call this morning to answer some questions. We've heard from a lot of folks that, you know, they're really struggling to recruit volunteers and to retain volunteers. And so we thought we would reach out to a few of the organizations that we knew were continuing to utilize volunteers during COVID, and to just kind of see what they were doing and how they were managing those volunteer relationships. And so, as Jess said, there's some questions that we've prepared to ask them. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of ask the first question, and then Karen, Linda, and Lorraine can jump in and answer those questions, and then we'll just kind of roll right through. Jess will be monitoring the chat, so if you have something that comes up, just type that question in, and we can kind of go from there, and then we'll make sure that there's room at the end for you guys to ask any questions that you might have as well. And so the first one that I have is pretty broad. How does your organization best utilize volunteers, and how has that changed due to COVID-19? I don't know who wants to jump in first. Karen, I see you first. So.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. Our volunteer base with Radford Fairlawn Daily Bread, I serve as the Meals on Wheels coordinator. Pre-COVID, we used volunteers in a variety of ways with both our dining room program as well as Meals on Wheels. With Meals on Wheels, our volunteers are mostly our drivers they deliver meals to their neighbors that we serve in Radford and Fairlawn. And then in the dining hall, the volunteer activities range from helping to prepare meals prior to anyone coming in, preparing the Meals on Wheels for pickup for our drivers, as well as serving. Pre-COVID, people could come in for a home-cooked meal in our dining room, and it really serves as a great opportunity for fellowship, and also to get some yummy, delicious food, because I do have to brag on our cooks. They're amazing. And then we had volunteers that helped with our food program and picking up food from Walmart, Kroger. We had food delivered from Virginia Tech and just a variety of things. After COVID, or in the midst of COVID, we made some significant changes to our program overall. And so our volunteers with Meals on Wheels continue to deliver meals, but for our dining program and other opportunities where we used volunteers, that was cut significantly, because without people coming into for meals, the roles changed. But then we added a program. We started delivering emergency meal boxes. That was, I hate to use the word success, only because we were in a situation where, you know, people needed, but it was success because we were able to quickly transition and provide meals to almost 100 families during a period of time. And so in doing those emergency meal boxes, where there were for 5 meals in each box, we also used volunteers in a new and different way and partnered with Radford City Police, Mullins Funeral, and Radford City Sheriff's Department in delivering those. And so while our needs changed and we needed probably less volunteers, we were able to create new programs and get more people involved.
Linda, you want to go next?
That's awesome, Karen. We, as you know from the name of our organization, depend a lot on our volunteers. We only have 3 part-time staff, and more than 150 volunteers are really the engine of our work. And when COVID hit, we had a lot of classes going, workplace-based, family literacy-based. Everything had to be suspended, which was super frustrating. But it was also a time of hope, because so many of our tutors stepped up and learned skills for remote tutoring. And we started doing training for our volunteers about how to use Zoom and Google Classroom and WhatsApp for video-based tutoring. And so remote tutoring has been able to continue. And then we started doing outside tutoring in classes. And we have, I mean, our volunteers are just incredible. There's a group of 20 English language learners in Floyd that meet with 4 tutors, and they're outside at tables spread out they hung a canopy, they have lights, they're doing everything they can to make sure learning continues despite the COVID precautions. So that's been really exciting. And we even have one grandma who a tutor dropped off books at her house, and then they would call over the phone, and she practiced learning to read this book, which she can now read to her grandson. So the creativity and the dedication of our volunteers is outstanding. And we continue to provide new resources. Like, we just set up an outside canopy behind our center, and we're trying to think outside the box. We started a hotline for people that just want phone-based help. Of course, the big quandary is the many students and the volunteers that, 1, don't have digital skills, and 2, don't have the technology or the Wi-Fi to interact that way. And thinking about winter, we're sure trying to get folks connected somehow through learning digitally. But we've been really lucky that people have continued as best they can and been able to pivot to continue to provide our services.
So, thank you.
that would believe me, I think. So you probably know I only started with the YMCA in January. So was just getting into the swing of how we work and what our volunteers do when everything changed. But prior to COVID, obviously our volunteer base was primarily students, because we are the YMCA at Virginia Tech, and we're putting students into those leading roles for programs for the community. So we had events such as Healthy Kids Day and the craft fair, and the students do some pop-up thrift stores and things like that. We've been providing after-school care and tutoring at several schools within Blacksburg for years, and that again is full of student volunteers. We have a senior connection program where the students are pairing up with seniors to beat loneliness and give them someone to talk to and to visit with. And we've had for years an after-school feeding program, which also occurred during the summertime at a couple of locations within the Blacksburg area. And the other big volunteer suck really is the thrift shop, because we have a limited amount of staff there, and it's a very big store. There's a lot to handle, and so that's really run by volunteers, mainly, again, students, and also community service. So when COVID hit, we suddenly and immediately had no students, and community service was also on pause for a while. And some of our programs, of course, stopped. We were no longer doing things within the schools, and we were having to cancel events, as everybody did. But very quickly, we decided to extend the feeding program, because the greatest need was that a lot of children in the county, especially not being at school, were not getting enough food. So we moved our summer feeding program and made it actually we were twice a week at the start there, and we called it Meals on Main, working with Feeding Southwest Virginia and the USDA. And initially, that was pretty much run by me and our amazing volunteer, Jim. He's a community volunteer who has, I think, been a volunteer with the Y for many, many years. He started out as a student leader, and Jim won't mind me saying he's up on the other end of the age group now, but he's still with us. So he really took the lead on that to help us get going. But obviously it was a big program. We were having to pack hundreds of meals and then distribute them. So we very quickly needed to reach more volunteers. So what we did, or what I was tasked with doing, is getting the community engaged with what we were doing and getting their help. So we have transitioned now to a lot of community volunteers, not just at the feeding program, but also in the thrift store, and just all ages. Our youngest volunteer is 14. They have to have a parent with them if they're under 14, but so I think there have been a few of those. But we have everyone from 14 through, I think our oldest is 80. And we did have, we're able to pick up some students who were already involved with us that didn't go home and that stayed in the area and just kind of kept volunteering. And then there's also been a few new students coming in throughout the summer, still reaching out to us. So we, like everybody else, had to do some pivoting and changing what we were doing, and really just addressing the needs of the community and finding the volunteers to make that work.
Thank you. You touched a little bit on this, but the next question is, how have you gotten new volunteers during this time? And I'm going to go backwards this time, and I'm going to start again with you, Lorraine, because I know at one point I saw that the YMCA was advertising, they were challenging some gyms in the community to come out and help unload trucks. Like, hey, we know you're strong, come out and help us. And so maybe if you want to talk a little bit about like some different innovative ways that you guys marketed or tried to promote to get new volunteers.
Right, yes. Obviously, we all use the Sign Up Genius of some description. We also have a volunteer place on our website, but that gets old when you keep posting that, click here to volunteer. So I just decided, okay, It's a lot of work for the meals. We have to drive to Feeding Southwest Virginia. We have to physically load hundreds of boxes, 5,000 pounds of food or 7,000 pounds of food and drink, whatever it is. And I've done it with just two of us, and it's not easy. So I said, okay, there's strong people in this town. There are gyms working out. let's challenge them. So we did start putting up come and do your morning workout here and help with loading. And we did have a couple of different gym people turning up. Kevin Bowen with Blacksburg Boxing was our first, and I mean, he basically did it single-handed. And then he was able to encourage a few of his friends there. And then one week we had, I think 15 women from one fitness program that was running at a gym, and they all came and just, it was great because we had loaded the truck up in Salem, and we drove back thinking, oh gosh, we're gonna have to unload this thing. And as we drove up, all these fit women appeared, and we just stepped back and let them work. So, they kind of really appreciated that. And we've had, earlier in the summer, we had one or two of the tech football players that were here. There was no training going on, so they were kind of using it as their workout to come and unload boxes. So that's one of the things we've been doing. But yeah, the challenge works, I think. Just trying to find a different way to say, hey, we're doing this, how about you? And also, people who do it love to have their picture taken, most of them, and say they've done it. So when we post that out there, and other people in the community say, oh gosh, I know her, Joelle is a prime one. Everybody knows Joelle Shank. She brought one or two of her teenage charges with her, and she kind of did a lot of work, packing meals, unloading, whatever, and just kind of, I want to say, using these people, but they're all very willing volunteers. So being able to post out there that they were doing it, then attracts so many more people that know them, and it really gives us a bigger reach with our posts as well. Okay.
Linda, you want to go on how you guys,
Yeah.
any volunteers?
Well, definitely we see a positive impact from what Lorene was mentioning with the marketing, promoting the great contributions of our current volunteers. Since we've been in this area for more than 40 years, we do have a database of people in our community who have volunteered for us in the past. And often, like if I need a volunteer for a man in Narrows, I can search that database and reach out to the previous volunteers, and many of them are looking for a way to become engaged right now. So that's been positive. And then the third strategy that's worked for us is working with partner agencies. So when I needed a bunch of volunteers to come to an evening outside class in Floyd, I reached out to other organizations in Floyd to find out if they had ideas of people that might be interested. And so we often have, a specific need. And so we find that when you reach out and say, can you do this on this night in this location, that helps people come on board. But we actually have been contacted by a lot more people than we can place right now because of the challenges of serving individuals who, we can't sit next to them. And so we're piloting a program where we work with a partner, such as Narrows Library is still open. So the student can come in, and the Narrows librarian can get them on Zoom and then leave the room, and then the tutor can help them through Zoom and remote access and screen sharing and those strategies. So once we figure out that, then we can engage more people remotely, which is what a lot of people are contacting us to do. It's just so many of our students can't get on the computer by themselves to access Zoom. So that's where we need more partners to help us get them started and let them sit in a room by themselves to do that. So anyway, we've been very fortunate. We have lots of amazing volunteers that we're very thankful for.
And Karen, you mentioned that you guys kind of recruited some new volunteers as well.
Yeah, so when the pandemic hit and everything kind of needed to shut down, we had to make some really hard decisions. I would say 90% of our volunteer base was over the age of 70, probably older than that, if I'm really honest. Not only that, the neighbors that we serve, particularly with Meals on Wheels, are also a very vulnerable part of our community, whether by age or due to the illnesses that they have. And so probably the hardest thing that I had to do was to call our current volunteers and ask many of them to kind of go on a volunteer vacation because it wasn't healthy or safe or anything like that for them to volunteer, nor for them to deliver to our neighbors. And so in recruiting volunteers, we really relied on the strength of our individual connections. We did kind of a little bit on Facebook, but the majority of our volunteers came from word of mouth. Because of the time that we need volunteers, a great benefit of everybody working at home is that we had a younger volunteer base. And so they were able to easily come in. Delivering from Meals on Wheels is probably max 2 hours, and that's from your house to our location and doing a route, max 2 hours. And so they were able to fit that in with kind of their work schedule. We did put different protocols in place. One of the things that's always been really important is that it's not just about delivering the meal. It's really about some one-on-one contact, because a lot of our neighbors literally could go all day with seeing no one. And so that face-to-face social interaction was super important. Because of COVID, we had to put new policies in place. And so for a lot of our neighbors, we asked them to have coolers outside. So then meals were put on inside of their coolers. But what we did do for some of our neighbors where that just wasn't a possibility, gloves and masks were required, but we also asked our neighbors to wear masks if they needed to open the doors and things like that. But our volunteer recruitment, really, it was amazing, kind of the outpouring that we received of people wanting to take part in what we do and having that opportunity to do that. And so what I'm actually though seeing now is, because people are starting to get back to work and lives are slightly resuming to normal, I need to recruit volunteers again, because we do try to limit kind of the contact. We have 4 routes that are delivered to, and we try to keep people at just 1 route per week. And so we're entering a new recruitment process because a lot of our volunteers who have been very faithful over the past few months are going back to work. And so now it kind of doesn't fit. But our Rafford, I'm going to tell you guys, Rafford is a loving community. Like, they're willing to do a lot of things to help, their neighbors. And so it was really a much easier process than I ever imagined in terms of recruiting new volunteers.
Thank you. And you kind of touched a little bit on the next question that I was going to ask, which is, what safety measures have you added, or are there any specific things that you guys are asking of your volunteers if they're coming in person? So maybe Karen, if you want to start, and we'll just kind of go back around.
Yeah, so the biggest things, definitely wearing masks and wearing gloves, and also using, we asked that they all used hand sanitizer in between deliveries. But right now, kind of the biggest thing is that we are making sure that our volunteers practice social distancing as a way of life. Because we all know that our numbers are slightly ticking up in Montgomery County and Rafford. And so we want to make sure that our volunteers believe in the safety measures that limit the spread. And we're also trying to limit younger volunteers, unfortunately. So we're not using high school students or college students right now, unless they were already volunteering with us. And some of that is just, I don't know about y'all, but when I was in college, I wasn't staying in my room either. So we can't, kind of control those aspects, and being realistic in what it's like to be 20. We just want to make sure that the volunteers that we use kind of practice social distancing as a way of life.
Thank you.
So our board policy currently is that tutoring takes place either remotely or outside, ideally with masks. We purchased these clear masks that no one seems to like, but we'll keep trying with the clear mask because eventually the outside option is going to go away. And then, of course, the social distancing, sitting far apart with different books is what we're striving. All of our current volunteers were notified of the current policies for safe tutoring. And then we added a waiver to the bottom of our student application and our tutor application that talks about, yes, I understand and will respect the CDC and local guidelines related to health and safety. And we're doing curbside pickup of materials from our resource room, and we have one person at a time can make by appointment, can come in. And we have, of course, there's a quandary of our 80-year-old volunteers that are ready to go. And so having that policy by the board helps us to say, here's what needs to happen so that it stays safe. That being said, I'm constantly worried, scared to death that folks are not going to adhere to what we're recommending in terms of safety. That certainly happened in Shawsville. We had a pair that were supposed to meet outside, but the student got too hot, so they went into the library. The library, fortunately, is closed now, but that wasn't our policy that they would do tutoring in the library. So not sure how we do that, except for we have our recommendations and they've signed a waiver that's where we are right now. So it's definitely a challenge.
So we've had quite a lot of things we needed to do because primarily we have never closed our thrift shop throughout. If we close the thrift shop, we lose most of our income to keep our other programs going. So with one or two literally dedicated staff and some wonderful volunteers, we've been able to keep it open and we've been able to keep it safe. So we immediately put in, right back in March, I think we were one of the first in the area to put up the Perspex screens around the cashiers area. We put out the tables in front of the cash register, so we were keeping customers and staff 6 feet apart. We immediately instituted a contact-free donation area in the back dock, which involved everybody wearing masks and gloves and people dropping off their donations on tables, and then the staff would come out, or the volunteers would come out and take those donations away, but would not be able to help you from your car or anything like that. And all donations were immediately moved to rooms within the building with dates on them and quarantined for, well, originally it was only 5 days, but the more donations came in, it ended up being weeks or months because we had so many donations, because of course everybody cleared out their attics and their garages with COVID, which is great. So those donations kept coming, and we we had to keep finding space to keep them, in the quarantine area and then bring them out onto the floor. So that went on, excuse me, almost immediately. And we also, of course, had the masks and the gloves and the hand sanitizer, and we our staff and volunteers are spraying that area with the disinfectant as approved by the CDC and everything. A little bit further along, we added COVID screening using things that we were finding on the VDH. So every staff and volunteer member for any of our programs now, at the start of their shift, their temperature is taken. There's a COVID, the questions that they have to answer and sign to say that they have not been in contact with COVID. I'm sure you've all seen these questions. So we're doing that every day. And with the meals program, we have kept that as contact-free as possible. When our volunteers turn up, we have tables set up 6 to 10 feet apart, and they, the boxes of the meals that they have to put into packaging, they just work over there in their own area and do the bagging. And then when it's time to distribute, we set up a canopy, and we have tables that are 6 feet long between the volunteers and the community that come to collect. All of our volunteers are wearing masks and using hand sanitizer. Some choose to use gloves. We provide those if they want them, but not everybody wants those latex gloves, especially out in the hot sun. It's no fun. I've done it. But we also do ask our community members who are coming to collect food to wear gloves. The children are supposed to stay in the car. It just should be an adult walks up. They take the bag or bags if they have multiple children and take it back to the car and drive away. So it's really fast, and there's no contact at all. So it's it sounds like a lot, but it really doesn't seem to be a problem. Everybody very quickly got used to having to do that COVID screening questionnaire, get their temperatures taken, and they're wearing their masks, and seems to be going well, but we're doing the best we can. So I think that's all.
Thank you. And I know each organization is different in how you guys work, but do you have any volunteer opportunities that can be done virtually, or like anything that you can package up and send home with someone that they can do for you and bring back to you, or anything like that that you've seen or had success with?
Is it my turn? Are we going backwards again?
Sure. That seems to work.
Keep us in order. We actually, I didn't even mention, we have a whole team of volunteers working on our craft fair, which we have decided to take virtual. Several months back, we were still discussing whether we would cancel it completely, but nobody wanted to lose it. It's the 51st year, so we have moved it to a virtual craft fair. We've been very lucky to find a great platform for that. So we have a team of volunteers. We meet every week by Zoom. So people are working on their parts of the event completely remotely. We haven't had an in-person meeting since January. So they are working on their tasks for the craft fair. We also have a new student who's doing a field study working with the meals program to provide educational opportunities, because usually with our meals programs, the children would sit at the location, eat the meals with the students, and have some enhancement activities going on. And because of COVID, there was a waiver which doesn't allow that. And so now we are getting the student that is putting together educational activities to go home with the bags. So she's doing that remotely, or coming in on her own to different areas when nobody else is there, and packaging those things. So there are those opportunities. We're also working on switching our students who usually went into the schools for tutoring to set up a virtual tutoring site for them to work with the children that way. So we're looking into trying to make that.
Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot it was my turn.
That's okay.
Remind me of the question again. I was looking at the chat.
That's okay.
Oh, digital, yes.
Virtual volunteer opportunities.
Yes. So we have lots of opportunities that, in addition to the tutoring, as Lorene mentioned, event planning is all done virtually, and we have an awesome digital communications intern who is supporting volunteers to learn skills like Zoom and developing online resources for distance education. So we have lots of opportunities for digital learning.
So we unfortunately don't really have remote opportunities. While we were doing our emergency mailboxes, we had a couple people who served as screeners for our intake process. But everything that we do kind of happens at the kitchen, putting, because they're home cooked meals. So putting those meals together, everything happens at the kitchen. So unfortunately, we don't have any virtual, I wish we did.
Yeah.
But our staff is also small, like super, super small. It's just myself and Dora Butler, who serves as our director. And so most of the administrative things, we do that. So there aren't really a lot of other opportunities for people to volunteer with us.
Thank you. The next one I'm going to ask is around communication. I think that this might be really helpful for people to hear, like, how do you communicate with your volunteers? And is it email? Is it phone call? Is it, social media? Or do you have a platform that you best communicate with volunteers? And so I guess we can start with you, Karen, and work our way back across.
So email and texts are my best friends. Text is actually my very best friend because as my volunteers, as they're delivering, there could be little that they need to let me know about our neighbors that we may need to check on, just various things. And so email and text have worked the very best for us. And in terms of training, we've done all of that via Zoom.
Yes, we do email and phone call and texting, a combination depending on the volunteer. Like I have 2 phone meetings this afternoon because the volunteers want to talk more in depth about their challenges with their students. So it just depends on the situation. But the onboarding of new tutors is also done through phone, email, and we have Zoom tutor meetings now.
Yep, email. Some texting for regular volunteers who are there a lot, but most are relying on email. I do get a surprising amount of people that contact me through Facebook Messenger, which I really don't encourage because, again, getting so many, I don't look at them because they're kind of just go into the background, and I find it, because then I usually end up saying, can you please email and this email address. But a lot of our initial contacts for new volunteers who've seen a post on Facebook and they want to get involved, they're using Messenger. So I'm having to be really good about trying to remember to check the Messenger, because we'll get a lot of those junk messages too in there. So just filtering that. But yeah, we mainly contact with email. We also contact people through the, we use Sign Up Genius. So there's the message facility there. And for some of the food program, there's some training involved, and that's done through Zoom, but coordinated with email. Very few phone calls because there just isn't time to make those calls sometimes.
Yeah, and I wanted to add that we have a Facebook group just for our volunteer tutors so they can share resources, and then we set up a drive this summer for tutors to upload and share activities and things like that, so they can support one another. And we have a list of mentors, other people they can reach out to so that they can get support in different ways. So those are 3 strategies we have to try to sort of improve tutor success, volunteer retention. And we have also seen that Facebook is a big way that people like to communicate.
Thank you for that. Well, I think at this point, we have a little bit of time left, so I'd love to open it up for questions. If there's anybody on here that wants to ask any specific questions about, recruiting and retaining volunteers. So you can type in chat or you can come off of mute.
And it looks like the only question in there in the chat now is around the platform that Laureen at the Y uses for the craft fair, which is Eventme. And she put the information in the chat there. Or if there's opportunities for others to maybe share what they're doing with their volunteers as well.
Morning all, this is Catherine from VT Engage. This is mostly for Lorraine, but I missed pieces of other folks. But since VT Engage is not doing in-person service events this semester, would it be helpful for us to funnel students that reach out to ask about volunteer opportunities to you? And if so, would you like that directly to your email, or is there a form? What works best?
Yes, to all of the above. Probably best to go through our website. We have that volunteer sales, the web to lead thing, and that comes directly to me and Enrique. So we can kind of filter where people need to go, whether they're looking at thrift shop opportunities or tutoring or feeding or whatever. So yes, please.
And I will say that we have gotten a few calls at the foundation of organizations who are looking for volunteer opportunities. And so some organizations are only offering virtual volunteers, but some organizations do want that safe social distancing opportunity to volunteer. And so if your organization is looking for volunteers, reach out to me and I'm happy to connect you with those who've reached out. We've gotten a lot of interest, people who couldn't make this call, but reached out and said, hey, we have, student organizations that want to volunteer. Can you please, connect us to nonprofits who are looking for those volunteer needs? And so just know that there are, those willing. I know, some of you guys might not want students, but there's other civic groups that are looking for volunteer opportunities as well. And so if you want, just let me know what you're looking for. That way I can connect you with the right person, because each group seems to have their own particular, set of restrictions on how they want to volunteer, but they still do want to volunteer. So I thought I would offer that information up as well. Any other questions, comments?
I will just say that the Eventity platform, our team spent hours researching and checking out different online platforms to host an event virtually, because none of us have the ability to create our own. And there's some really good organizations locally that are creating their own virtual platform. But this Eventity, they're fairly new, and but as soon as COVID hit, they just ramped it up, and they are creating a platform that's affordable. And when they say they are there 24/7 to help you, it's true. I mean, we have asked them questions, and within 2 hours we're getting responses, no matter what time of night or day. And they're really great at holding your hand and walking you through. So if anybody's looking to move events virtually, and as we're all finding out, this is, even when COVID has gone, the way we do things is going to be different. So potentially events are going to be hybrid at the very least in the future. So, they will accommodate that too. And they're just constantly evolving. So if you're interested in those, I put the best person to contact in there, in that chat.
There is a question in the chat asking for suggestions for a volunteer database. And I know, Linda, you had mentioned that. I don't know if others use a database, but any thoughts there from your groups?
We are running our volunteer database through Salesforce, which we have for everything else. So it has not been completed. So it's something we're building. But it certainly has the capability if you have Salesforce already.
We have an ancient program that was developed for Virginia literacy programs called VALIT. So it's very specific, but we have started just using Excel spreadsheets.
And Linda, you put a question in the chat, but you might as well ask the group for anyone using volunteers to work with children.
Well, we will be as far as our virtual tutoring and then feeding the children. So it won't be direct in person, but yeah.
Yeah. We have a family literacy program where we work with the parents to help them learn the skills to read with their children and help their children succeed in school. And simultaneously, the kids are engaged in literacy and learning activities. And our partner historically has been the library, but the libraries tell me that children's programs will be the very last ones they'll start again. And so I'm just curious if other organizations are utilizing volunteers to work directly with children.
No other questions in the chat. Anyone else?
Okay, any other last minute questions? All right, well, thank you guys for sitting on our panel and answering questions for us today. We appreciate that. And I'll be happy to, this will be posted on our website as well for you guys, if you wanted to share it with anyone else. And moving forward, we really, as we're planning out the remainder of the listening sessions for the year, we really utilized a survey that we sent out, a COVID-19 check-in. And so that's still live. So if you guys would like to fill that out, if you haven't already, or if there's anything new that you want to put in that you'd like for us to talk about during one of our nonprofit listening sessions, please fill that survey out. Shortly, we're going to start doing our nonprofit feature Fridays. So we're going to start featuring nonprofit organizations each Friday on our social media. So if you've already filled that out, then you're good. But if you haven't, take the time to fill that out. We'd love to feature you. Our next call is going to be October 15th, and that call is going to be on engagement and collaboration in a virtual setting. So we hope that you guys will be there as well. And thanks for starting your day with us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.